Cowboy had Christmas dinner alone until native woman arrived and whispered, "Can you buy cookies?" The snow had been falling all day, covering the wide-open fields with a soft, white blanket. The wind whispered across the prairie, bending the tall, dry grass and carrying the faint scent of pine from the distant hills. In the middle of this quiet winter scene stood a small wooden cabin, smoke curling from its chimney into the gray sky. Inside the cabin, a cowboy named Jack was preparing for Christmas dinner. Jack was a tall man with broad shoulders, a weathered face, and eyes that had seen many years of hard work under the sun. He wore a simple plaid shirt, worn jeans, and boots that had followed him through countless trails. His hands, strong and calloused, moved with careful attention as he arranged a modest meal on the rough wooden table. Browse. There was a roasted chicken, slightly browned but still steaming, a loaf of bread he had baked himself, and a few pieces of cheese. A single candle flickered in the center of the table, casting a soft golden light across the room. It was Christmas Eve, a night when most people would be gathering with family, friends, or neighbors, sharing laughter and stories. But Jack would be spending it alone. He had been a cowboy for most of his life, traveling from one ranch to another, moving cattle, mending fences, and riding through the endless fields. His work kept him busy during the warmer months, but winter was quiet and lonely. His family lived far away in a small town, and his friends had their own lives, busy with celebrations he could not join. Jack sighed as he looked at the small feast before him. The food smelled comforting, but it could not fill the emptiness he felt inside. He had always liked the quiet, had always enjoyed being outdoors, feeling free under the wide sky, but tonight, the silence pressed against him in a way it rarely did. He missed the warmth of conversation, the sound of someone laughing, even the small arguments that came with family gatherings. The cabin felt bigger than it was, the walls echoing the stillness of the snowy night. He poured himself a small cup of tea and took a sip, letting the warmth spread through him. The candle flickered as a gust of wind rattled the window pane, and Jack shivered slightly. He thought about the years gone by, about the Christmases he had spent riding horses through icy trails, about the time he had tried to cook a turkey by the campfire and ended up with a burnt mess. Memories of laughter and stories flashed in his mind, some sweet, some tinged with regret. As Jack took a bite of the chicken, he looked out the window at the snow-covered land. The world outside seemed peaceful, untouched, almost magical. But the quiet made his loneliness sharper, and he found himself wishing for a visitor, someone to share even a few words with, someone to break the stillness of the evening. He knew the chances were slim. The ranch was far from town, and few people traveled this far in winter. Still, he could not help but hope. Jack pushed his plate aside and leaned back in his chair. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, sending a warm glow across the room. He watched the shadows dance on the walls, each flicker reminding him of the years he had spent alone during the holidays. He thought about the stories he had heard as a boy, stories of families gathered together, sharing meals, singing songs, and exchanging small gifts. He remembered the laughter of his cousins, the smell of his mother's cooking, the way the lights on the Christmas tree twinkled like tiny stars. All of it seemed so far away now, almost like a dream. As the evening deepened, the wind outside grew stronger. Snowflakes tapped against the windows, and the temperature inside the cabin began to drop slightly. Jack added a few more logs to the fire, watching the flames leap higher and listening to the soft hiss of the burning wood. He felt a pang of sadness, realizing that this Christmas would be quiet, a stark contrast to the celebrations he had once known. Yet, he tried to find comfort in the little things, the warmth of the fire, the taste of his simple meal, the soft glow of the candlelight. Jack's mind wandered to the past, to the people he had met on the trails, to the friends he had made and lost, to the strangers who had become companions for a night. He thought about the bonds formed in fleeting moments, the kindness of strangers who offered a meal or a helping hand. Perhaps, he mused, Christmas was not only about family, but also about the moments when strangers became part of one another's story, even if only for a brief time. But he picked up the fork again and took another bite of chicken, savoring the flavor, trying to push away the loneliness that lingered. The cabin seemed to breathe with him, the walls holding the quiet, the fire crackling in rhythm with his heartbeat. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in silence and stillness. Jack felt the weight of the night pressing in, but he also felt a strange sense of calm, a reminder that even in solitude there was beauty to be found. Hours passed slowly. Jack finished his meal and leaned back, gazing into the fire. He thought about the simple joys he had experienced throughout his life, about the small victories and quiet moments that made each day meaningful. He realized that, despite the loneliness, he had much to be grateful for. The land, the freedom, the memories, and the ability to find peace in his own company. Just as he was about to extinguish the candle and prepare for bed, a sound broke the quiet. Best. It was faint at first, almost lost in the wind. But then it came again. A soft knocking at the cabin door. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He was surprised, unsure if he should answer. Visitors were rare, especially on a snowy Christmas Eve. He rose from his chair, his boots crunching softly on the wooden floor, and walked toward the door. Peering through the small window, he saw a figure standing in the snow. A woman, small and bundled against the cold, held a woven basket in her hands. Her breath formed tiny clouds in the icy air. Jack opened the door cautiously, not knowing what to expect.
"Can you buy cookies?" she whispered, her voice soft and almost shy.
Jack blinked, taken aback by the question. It was an unusual way to greet someone on Christmas Eve, but there was something gentle in her tone, something human and unassuming. Breath. He looked at her, noticing the tiredness in her eyes, the coldness of her hands, and the determination that had brought her all this way through the snow.
For a moment, Jack hesitated, unsure of how to respond.
But then he smiled softly, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "Sure," he said, stepping aside to let her in. Jack opened the door wider, allowing the cold air to sweep into the cabin.
The snowflakes clung to the edges of her coat and hat, sparkling in the dim light from the cabin's single candle.
She stepped in carefully, her boots crunching softly on the wooden floor. Jack could feel the chill in the air slowly mixing with the warm glow from the fire, and the small space seemed suddenly brighter, almost alive. Breaths. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice calm and gentle. She lowered her hood and shook her head lightly, letting loose a few stray curls that had escaped her braid. Her eyes were dark and shining, reflecting both the cold of the night and a quiet determination. In her hands she held a small woven basket filled with homemade cookies. The sweet smell of sugar and cinnamon filled the cabin almost instantly. Jack took a deep breath and felt a strange sense of warmth, one that had nothing to do with the fire. "Of course," he said, giving her a friendly nod. "Come in, warm yourself by the fire." She smiled faintly as if surprised by the offer. Slowly she walked closer to the hearth, letting the warmth touch her hands and face. Jack noticed that her cheeks were red from the cold, and he could see the way her small fingers clutched the basket, not out of fear, but carefulness. There was something fragile and strong at the same time in the way she carried herself. Jack gestured toward a chair near the fire. "Sit here for a bit." "Base, you must be freezing." She hesitated for a moment, then lowered herself onto the chair, still holding the basket on her lap. Jack couldn't help but notice the careful way she adjusted her coat, smoothing the fabric over her knees, as if she wanted to make sure everything remained neat. There was a quiet dignity in her presence, something Jack hadn't seen in a long time.
"I walked from the reservation nearby," she said softly.
her voice almost blending with the crackling of the fire.
I was hoping to sell a few cookies for my family.
We need a little money for supplies and for Christmas. She paused and looked down at her hands. I didn't think I'd find anyone out here tonight. Jack nodded slowly, listening to her words. He could feel the sincerity in her tone, the honesty of someone who worked hard and had a purpose. He thought about how different her life must be from his own, and yet there was something familiar in her story. The same struggle to make ends meet, the same desire for connection during a time when the world seemed quiet and distant. Well, you found me, Jack said, giving a small laugh. I don't have a lot, but I can buy a few cookies. Her eyes lifted to meet his, and for a moment, Jack saw a flash of relief and gratitude. She nodded as if to say, "Thank you," though she didn't need to speak the words aloud. There was a shared understanding between them. Two people brought together on a cold Christmas Eve by circumstance and chance. Jack took the basket gently from her hands and examined the cookies. They were shaped like little stars and hearts, decorated with sugar and icing. Some were round, some were slightly uneven, but all of them looked homemade, baked with care. The smell made Jack's stomach growl slightly, though he didn't say it out loud. Instead, he smiled quietly to himself, thinking about the small joy of a sweet treat on a cold winter night. "These look wonderful," he said. "How much do you want for them?" She thought for a moment, then said softly, "Just enough for flour and sugar. And maybe a little extra if you want to help my family." Jack nodded again, reaching for his wallet.
That's fair.
"I'll take enough to cover both." He handed her the money and she carefully placed it in her coat pocket. For a brief moment there was silence between them, filled only by the crackle of the fire and the soft tapping of snow against the window. Jack felt an odd mix of emotions, curiosity, warmth, and a sense of connection he hadn't felt in years. "You can stay here for a while if you want," Jack said after a moment. "Bear. I was just about to finish my dinner and I have a bit of chicken left. It's not much, but you're welcome to share it." The woman's eyes widened slightly, and a small smile appeared on her face. "Thank you," she whispered.
That's very kind of you. Jack gestured toward the table.
"Come on, sit down. Don't worry about the mess." "It's just me here." She set the basket on the table and took a seat across from him. The firelight reflected off her face, highlighting the careful expression she wore, part shyness, part curiosity. Jack noticed that she seemed polite and humble, but there was also a quiet strength in the way she held herself, a confidence that came from knowing her own worth. As they shared the simple meal, they began to talk. Jack told her about his life on the ranch, about the cattle, the long rides, and the endless work that kept him busy during the warmer months. He spoke honestly, without exaggeration, and she listened intently, nodding and asking questions. Her voice was soft, but her questions showed intelligence and a genuine interest in his stories. In turn, she told Jack about her life on the reservation. She spoke of her family, of the challenges they faced, and of the traditions they held dear. She talked about the joy of small celebrations, about songs sung around a fire, about the importance of community and togetherness. Jack listened, fascinated by the richness of her experiences, and he felt a growing respect for the life she led. As the conversation continued, the cabin seemed to grow warmer, not just from the fire, but from the connection forming between them. Jack realized that, for the first time in years, he felt truly understood by someone who was not part of his family or his usual circle. There was a simplicity in their interaction, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful connections come from unexpected places. The woman reached into the basket and offered him one of the cookies. "Try one," she said softly. "I made them myself." Jack took the cookie and bit into it. The sweetness was comforting, the flavor rich and real. Bah. He smiled, savoring the small joy of the moment.
These are excellent, he said.
Breath. You must have worked hard to make them.
She nodded, a faint blush coloring her cheeks.
Yes. It takes time, but I like baking. It makes me feel connected to my family, even when I'm far away. Jack felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of gratitude for her presence. It was strange, he thought, how a simple act like sharing cookies and a meal could bring such comfort. The loneliness he had felt all day seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a quiet happiness he hadn't realized he was missing. As the evening wore on, they continued to share stories. Jack spoke of the winters he had spent riding through snowstorms, of the nights spent alone under the stars, and of the small victories that made each day worth living. The woman spoke of her childhood, of lessons learned from elders, of the pride in her heritage and the bonds of family. They laughed quietly at shared experiences and nodded in understanding at the hardships they had both faced. Time passed without notice, and soon the shadows in the cabin grew long. The fire burned low, sending out a warm, steady glow. Jack looked at the woman and realized that the evening had turned into something special. It was not just a chance meeting, it was a connection that reminded him of the importance of kindness, of sharing, of human warmth. The woman glanced at the clock on the wall. I should probably get going soon, she said softly. It's late, and I need to return home. Jack nodded, feeling a pang of sadness at the thought of her leaving.
I understand, he said.
Thank you for coming by. It was nice to have company. I didn't expect anyone tonight. She smiled, placing the empty basket on the table. Neither did I, she said. But I'm glad I did. Merry Christmas, Jack. Jack smiled back, a sense of peace settling over him. Merry Christmas, he replied. She put on her coat and hood and with a careful wave stepped out into the snow. Jack watched as her figure disappeared into the falling flakes, feeling a quiet joy that he hadn't experienced in years. He returned to the fire, feeling less alone than before, carrying with him the warmth of human connection and the simple magic of an unexpected friendship. The night continued quietly, but Jack's heart felt lighter. He realized that Christmas was not just about grand celebrations or elaborate meals. It was about moments like this, about shared stories, about kindness, and about the people who touch your life in small, meaningful ways. He sat by the fire, savoring the memory of the evening, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly content. The snow had settled into a thick, soft blanket over the land outside, and the world seemed still and quiet. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly, sending flickers of golden light across the walls. Jack sat near the hearth, the warmth of the flames brushing against his face, and thought about the woman who had visited earlier. He had not expected her to come, and yet her arrival had brought something he hadn't felt in a long time. Connection. He stared into the fire, remembering the softness of her voice, the care in the way she had held the basket of cookies, and the gentle smile that had appeared when he had offered her a place by the fire. Jack realized that for all his years riding across the open fields, helping ranches, and living under the vast sky, he had rarely allowed himself to truly connect with someone outside his small circle. Tonight had been different. Tonight a stranger had reminded him that small gestures could carry great meaning. He thought about the stories she had shared, the way she had described her family, the life on the reservation, the songs and traditions that made their holidays special. Even in her struggles, she carried pride, resilience, and kindness. Jack felt a warmth in his chest as he remembered her laughter, quiet and soft, but full of life. He realized that human connection was something more precious than he had given it credit for.
Jack's thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the cabin door.
At first he tensed, unsure who could be visiting now. Then he saw her figure stepping into the warm cabin once more. She smiled at him, brushing snowflakes off her coat. "I forgot my basket," she said quietly, though her eyes held a playful glint. Jack laughed softly, shaking his head.
You really didn't need to come back for that, he said, standing to help her. It's just an emptied basket now.
You don't need it. She smiled and shook her head. I wanted to bring it back, she said softly. It feels polite to return what you don't need.
Bye. And I wanted to talk a little longer, if that's okay. Bye.
Jack felt a sudden happiness. Of course, he said, gesturing toward the chair by the fire.
Breaths. Sit down. You're welcome here as long as you like. She lowered herself into the chair, letting the fire warm her hands. Jack poured them both a cup of tea, and the cabin seemed to glow with a quiet comfort. The snow continued to fall outside, but inside the world felt safe, warm, and alive. They began to talk again, this time in a quieter, more reflective way.
Jack told her about his childhood, about growing up on a small ranch and learning to ride horses before he could even walk properly.
He spoke of long summers herding cattle, of nights spent staring at the stars, feeling both small and infinite at the same time. He talked about the friendships he had made on the trail and the people he had met, some who stayed in his life and some who had vanished like footprints in the snow. The woman listened closely, her eyes wide with interest. Barash. She nodded at his words, asked questions, and offered insights that showed she was not only listening but truly understanding. "You've seen a lot," she said softly, "but you seem to carry it with kindness, not bitterness." Jack smiled. "I try," he said. "Life teaches you lessons, sometimes the hard way, but the best ones come from people who show you kindness, even when you don't expect it." The woman nodded, her fingers lightly touching the edge of the cup she held.
I know what you mean,
she said. "My family, they taught me the same thing. Even when life is hard, it's the kindness you show and receive that matters most." Despair. There was a quiet moment as they both sipped their tea, letting the words sink in. Outside, the wind shifted, making the cabin creak slightly, but inside, a calm had settled. Jack felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. It was not the peace that came from silence alone, but from shared presence, from a stranger becoming a companion, even if only for a night. But Jack looked at her and asked gently, "Do you usually spend Christmas like this? Traveling alone, selling cookies?"
She shook her head, a small smile on her face.
He glances around in despair. He glances around in despair. "No," she says.
"But sometimes life requires you to do things alone."
That doesn't make it any less meaningful, though.
Jack nodded, thinking about his own life. He had spent many Christmases alone, not always by choice. And yet, he realized that the evening's visit had reminded him that meaningful moments could appear unexpectedly. He felt a growing respect for her courage, for traveling through snow to sell cookies, and for the gentle way she had carried herself. As they continued talking, Jack shared stories of his adventures on the trail, the times he had gotten lost in snowstorms, the nights he had spent helping injured animals, and the moments of beauty he had witnessed in the open fields. She listened, occasionally laughing softly, sometimes gasping at the dangers he had faced.
In return, she told him about the traditions of her community, about the songs and dances performed during holidays, about the small joys that made life rich and full.
despairs. Jack felt a new appreciation for the depth of her life. Despair. Jesus spoke with pride, not arrogance, and her words painted pictures of warmth, resilience, and care. He realized that even in her struggles, she carried a joy that was contagious, a quiet strength that made him feel connected to something bigger than himself. Time seemed to slow in the cabin. The fire burned low, the candle flickered gently, and the world outside disappeared beneath a thick layer of snow. Jack and the woman spoke without hurry, letting the conversation unfold naturally. Jack realized that in years of solitude he had rarely allowed himself to linger in moments like this, moments that reminded him of the value of listening, of sharing, and of being fully present. At one point, Jack reached into the basket and took a cookie. He offered it to her, and she accepted with a small laugh.
You've already had one, she said playfully.
Jack smiled. There's always room for one more, he said. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the crackling fire providing a gentle soundtrack. Jack noticed that her presence made the cabin feel fuller, brighter, and more alive. There was an energy in the way she moved, in the way she spoke, in the way she spoke. He felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire, a feeling of connection that spread through him like sunlight breaking through a winter storm. After a while, the woman leaned back in her chair and looked at Jack. I think I understand why you live out here, she said softly. Rest. There's something peaceful about it, something that teaches patience and strength. Jack nodded, thinking about the vast fields, the open skies, and the endless trails he had traveled. Yes, he said. Bet. It's hard at times. Yes. But it's also freeing. You learn a lot about yourself when you're out here, alone or with few people. The woman smiled faintly.
And sometimes, when someone comes along, it reminds you that you're not as alone as you think.
Best. Jack felt a lump in his throat. She had captured the feeling perfectly, the mix of solitude and the rare, unexpected connection that made life meaningful.
He nodded, letting her words settle. There was truth in them, and he felt grateful for the reminder.
They continued to share stories, jokes, and memories long into the night. Jack told her about the winters he had spent fixing fences in the cold, of the animals he had saved, of the small victories that made each day worth living. She spoke of her childhood, her family, and the values her parents and elders had taught her. Each story built a bridge between them, connecting two lives that had previously been separate, showing how kindness and openness could bring people together. As the fire burned low, the woman glanced at the clock. I should get going soon, she said.
It's late, and I don't want to be out in the snow too long. Jack nodded, feeling a sense of sadness that their evening together was ending. I understand, he said.
But thank you for everything. For sharing your stories, for bringing your warmth into this cabin, for reminding me that people matter.
She smiled softly.
Breaths. And thank you, she said, for letting me in, for your kindness, and for showing me that strangers can be friends, even if just for a night. Bah. Jack watched as she put on her coat and hood, adjusting them carefully before stepping toward the door. He felt a quiet happiness and a sense of fulfillment he had not experienced in years. She waved gently, and with a soft step she disappeared into the snowy night. Jack closed the door behind her and stood for a moment, letting the memory of her presence linger. The cabin felt quiet again, but not empty. The warmth of their shared stories and the connection they had formed filled the space, and Jack realized that loneliness, while real, could be softened by human kindness and understanding. He returned to the fire, thinking about the evening. It had begun with a knock on the door, a simple request for cookies, and had transformed into a night of shared stories, laughter, and reflection. Jack smiled quietly to himself, grateful for the reminder that even strangers could make a profound difference in one's life. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a deep sense of peace. He realized that Christmas was not only about family or gifts, but about moments of connection, about kindness, and about the people who touch our hearts in unexpected ways. Tonight had been one of those moments, and he knew he would carry it with him for the rest of his life. Had softened to a gentle whisper, brushing across the fields, and the world looked bright and peaceful under the soft morning light. Inside the cabin, Jack stirred from sleep and stretched, feeling the quiet calm of the new day. The fire had burned low during the night, leaving behind warm embers that glowed faintly, casting soft shadows on the walls. He could still feel the warmth and presence of last night in the air, as though the memories of the woman who had visited lingered softly around him. Jack got up and poured himself a cup of coffee, taking a moment to sip and let the warmth spread through his body. The previous evening had been unexpected, unusual, and deeply meaningful. He found himself smiling quietly, remembering the woman's soft voice, her gentle laugh, and the stories she had shared. The cookies she had sold, the small act that had brought her to his cabin, felt like a symbol of something larger, a reminder that even the simplest gestures could create lasting connections. He glanced out the window, watching the snow glisten under the soft light. The fields, fences, and distant hills all seemed touched by magic, as though the world itself had slowed to honor the quiet beauty of the season. Jack took a deep breath and felt a sense of gratitude. It was rare for him to pause and appreciate moments like these, but last night had reminded him of the importance of noticing small joys, of seeing the beauty in human kindness, and of valuing the company of others, even if it was brief. As he was thinking, there was a soft knock at the door. Jack's heart skipped a beat, remembering last night, and he quickly moved to open it. To his surprise, the woman was standing there again, this time with a brighter smile and cheeks flushed from the cold.
In her hands, she carried a small bundle, wrapped carefully in cloth.
"Good morning," she said softly, her eyes sparkling.
I thought I could stop by and share a little more.
I brought something for you. Jack stepped aside to let her in, feeling a warm happiness spread through him.
"Come in," he said. "You didn't have to bring anything. Last night was already special." She shook her head gently. "I wanted to," she said.
I thought we could have a proper Christmas breakfast together. It's a small gift, but it's meaningful.
"Pay." Jack guided her to the chair by the fire, and she placed the bundle on the table carefully. He untied the cloth and found a small loaf of bread, freshly baked, with the smell of warmth and sweetness rising from it. Pay. She had also included a small jar of jam she had made herself. The simplicity of the gift touched Jack in a way he hadn't expected.
It smells wonderful, he said, breaking a small piece of bread and offering it to her. She smiled and took it, spreading a little jam on her slice.
"It's simple," she said, "but it reminds me of home, of family, of Christmas." They shared the breakfast slowly, savoring the food and the warmth of the fire. The cabin seemed brighter, filled not only with light but with a sense of companionship that Jack had rarely experienced. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from simple topics to deeper reflections. Jack told her about the work he needed to do on the ranch today, about mending fences and checking on the livestock, and she listened with interest, occasionally asking questions. In return, she shared stories of her family, the traditions they practiced, and the values that had shaped her life. She spoke about how her community came together during the holidays, how neighbors supported one another, and how even the smallest acts of kindness mattered. Jack felt inspired by her words, recognizing how much wisdom could come from simplicity. and care. As the morning passed, the woman glanced around the cabin and noticed the few decorations Jack had set up. A small wreath on the wall, a candle on the table, and a few pine branches gathered from the forest.
It's simple, but it's beautiful, she said softly.
It feels like home. Jack smiled quietly. It is home, he said. Bah. Even in its simplicity, it has comfort. It has warmth. And it has memories, Bess. The woman nodded, her eyes reflecting a quiet understanding. That's what makes a home, she said. It's not just the things inside it, but the moments we share and the people we let in. Jack felt a lump in his throat. Her words carried truth, and he realized that last night had been more than a chance encounter. It had been a reminder of what truly mattered. He felt gratitude not only for her presence, but also for the lesson she had brought into his life. After breakfast, they decided to sit by the fire for a while longer, talking about hopes, dreams, and memories. Jack shared stories of adventures he had taken in the past, of the vast landscapes he had crossed, and of the quiet moments under the stars that had stayed with him. The woman listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and offering her own reflections. In turn, she spoke of the small joys that had made her childhood happy, of the lessons her parents and elders had taught her, and of the ways her community came together to celebrate and support each other. Jack realized that even in lives that seemed different, the desire for connection, warmth, and understanding was the same. As they spoke, Jack noticed how naturally their conversation flowed. There was no awkwardness, no need for pretense, just two people sharing their lives, learning from each other, and finding comfort in the shared moment. The firelight danced across their faces, and for a while the world outside seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, two strangers who had become companions for this quiet Christmas morning. At one point, Jack reached for a piece of the bread she had brought and offered it to her. "Here," he said. "It's still warm. You made it beautifully."
She smiled and took it, spreading a small amount of jam. "Thank you," she said.
It's simple, but it reminds me of my family. I wanted to share it with someone who appreciates it. Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude. It was more than the food. It was the thought, the effort, and the kindness behind it. He realized that sharing even the smallest things could carry great meaning, and that connection was not measured by grand gestures but by presence, attention, and care. As the morning moved toward afternoon, they continued to talk and share stories. Jack showed her a few of the tools he used on the ranch, explaining their purpose and the care needed to maintain them. She listened with curiosity, asking questions and showing genuine interest. In turn, she showed him the basket she had woven for her cookies, explaining the techniques and traditions behind it. Jack marveled at the skill and patience it took, realizing again how meaningful even small, thoughtful acts could be. They laughed at small mishaps, shared memories of childhood games, and reflected on lessons learned from life. Jack felt lighter than he had in years, as if the weight of loneliness had lifted slightly, replaced by a sense of warmth and companionship. The woman's presence had brought life into the cabin, making it feel like a home filled with laughter, stories, and shared moments. As the day passed, Jack noticed how much the snow had softened outside. The fields were still white, but the sunlight reflected off the snow, creating a sparkling, magical effect. He felt a quiet peace settle over him, knowing that this unexpected visit had transformed his Christmas. It was no longer about being alone. It was about connection, kindness, and shared moments that would stay in his heart forever. Before she left that afternoon, the woman helped Jack clean up the breakfast dishes. Back. They moved together in a comfortable rhythm, talking quietly and smiling at each other's stories. When the chores were done, she wrapped herself in her coat and prepared to step out into the snow. Jack walked her to the door, feeling a mix of sadness and gratitude. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. Best. This Christmas it's been more meaningful than any I've had before. She smiled warmly. And thank you, she said. For letting me in, for sharing your home, and for reminding me of the importance of kindness and connection. Jack watched as she stepped into the snow, leaving behind the warmth and comfort of her presence, but taking with him a sense of joy and fulfillment that would remain. The cabin seemed quieter again, but it was filled with the memory of shared stories, laughter, and the simple magic of human connection. He returned to the fire, letting the warmth wrap around him. He thought about the lessons of the day, about the small moments that mattered more than grand gestures, and about the importance of being present for others.